Okay, ready to go. We'll just start with the refuge lines and generation of bodhicitta to set up our motivation. So if you find a comfortable seat. Sangye choreng soki chonam la jangchu badu jakni kyapsu chi dage chunyen gipe sonam gi drola panchie senge drupa jo sangye choreng soki chonam la Jangchu Badu Jakni Kyapsu Shi Dage Chunyen Gipe Sonam Gi Drola Panchir Sange Drupa Jo. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Thank you. And in that spirit, let's engage with the last session from me in the retreat. Okay. If you remember, we were looking at we go right back at the beginning. His Holiness was talking about dependence. He sort of divided up the way things depend one upon another, the way everything is interdependent, into three sorts of levels or layers or different angles, if you like. One of them was causes, the dependence upon causes. The other one was on wholes and parts, which is also dependence of the whole on the part, and then the parts on their parts, and so on. And I think nowadays in maths and science, they call that mereology. There's an actual kind of maths and science of wholes and parts. And then the last one was noticing how things depend on thought. And we've had some of all of those as we've gone through. But in this last session, I wanted to focus a bit more on noticing how everything depends upon thought, because it's a good one to be clear about. In one level, it's very, very easy and not at all contentious, because you say, well, of course, everything we experience, we can only experience through our experience of the five senses and whatever we can think about it, or whatever we can infer from it. That is just the way it is, and I don't think anyone would contend that. And I think if you went right back to two of the very famous Buddhist logicians, Dinaga and Dharmakirti, a very long time ago in India, Dharmakirti said, there is no other source of knowledge but the experience of the five senses and the ability to infer things from it using the mind, i.e. to bring mental consciousness to bear on the experience of the five senses and then work things out from it. It's, although said a long time ago, very austere and very simple, it's sort of amazingly close to the way most empirical scientists would look at it. I mean, Dharmakirti even went as far, so did the Buddha in his own way, as to say, even scriptural authority, is not a source of knowledge in the way these are. And you need these to be able to understand what scriptural authority might be anyway. So it's kind of dependent on that. So, but when you get to the part that says noticing how everything depends on thought, this is the very easy one, just saying, well, of course it does, in virtue of being alive, virtue of being a human being, the only way I can have any experience is through the medium of my sensory experience. But of course, that is bound up and I'm aware of it via mental consciousness. And as we were talking with colors, the colors aren't really in anything. They're not either in the object out there, and surprise, surprise, not in the brain either. If you bring all of these things together, and there are the right causes in terms of being able to perceive different frequencies of light, then color manifests and appears the way it does, but appearing to exist in a way that it doesn't, like it's actually in there, in the pigment, in the fabric or whatever. So there's that kind of dependency, depending on thought, and it's fairly sort of easy and uncontentious. But then there's one that I think causes more confusion. It's a real one, but then people it's easier to get confused about it or to go over the top with it and say, well, yeah, there's also something we bring to our experience of reality, which is our kind of projections. And we all know this one. If we correct in the direction of our expectations. It's why you have to train people to proofread, because very often there might be a typo or a word missing, but we're really good. And if we go back, if you remember, we were talking about the illusions of somehow we automatically fill in the paper where there should really be a hole, because the mind likes that sort of continuity. There's a survival value in it. In the same way, if we're reading away, then the odd typo or the odd missing word, we might fill in and not even notice that it's there. So it's more subtle and more complex. We can study more about that, both within the Buddhist literature and in contemporary neuroscience and understandings of the way perception works and the way our experience is dependent on consciousness and on thought. But important to sort of get it clear, because the one we want to veer away from is the idea that somehow it's all a figment of our imagination, that we create the world completely out of nothing by ourselves, as it were. And that's a kind of a rather extreme form of idealism, which is also not really borne out by reality as it actually is when we think about it. So His Holiness kicked off this subject. Hang on, it always goes, I have to click it, then swipe it. That's better. And he started with a quote from the Buddha saying, "Here, even the various mind-pleasing blooming flowers and attractive, shining, supreme golden houses have no inherently existent maker at all. They are set up through the power of thought. Through the power of conceptuality, the world is established." So if we think about other people or objects, we can ask again, okay, when we see the appearance, does it appear to us as if a good chunk of their mode of appearance is actually supplied by us? Or does it appear that we are wholly independent from them and they from us? It's worth just turning that over a bit, thinking, do either people or things usually appear to us as in the manner the Buddha was talking in the sense of having their appearance having a lot to do with the dependence upon the way we see them and what we bring to the party, as it were. Because when we're kind of affected by emotions on a subtle level, they can be quite difficult to recognize and even more difficult to kind of get to grips with how we hold on to them. I mean, again, it's always easier to see with the extreme cases, kind of the really intensely disliked or hated person a thing you can see how it appears substantial, unchanging, existing wholly from its own side and not in any way dependent on thought. And there's another passage I remember, I don't go too much into quoting, but it's very, very useful, that again His Holiness pointed to from Tsongkhapa on this one. And I think, here's a passage. A coiled rope's speckled colour and coiled form are similar to those of a snake, and when the rope is perceived in a dim area, the thought arises, this is a snake. As for the rope, at that time, when it is seen to be a snake, the collection and parts of the rope are not in the slightest way a snake. Therefore, that snake is merely set up by conceptuality, i.e., the person who's perceiving it sees it as a snake. In the same way, when the thought I arises in dependence on the mind and body, nothing within mind and body, neither the collection that is a continuum of earlier and later moments, nor the collection of the parts at one time, nor the separate parts, nor the continuum of any of the separate parts, is in the slightest way the I. Also, there's not even the slightest something that is a different entity from mind and body that is apprehendable as the I. Consequently, the mind is merely set up by conceptuality. Independence upon mind and body, it's not established by way of its own entity. So that's relating directly back to that sameness and difference logic that we've been kind of getting into in our own meditations. Is the I the same as or different from? It's not. So it's kind of this I, which we can't come up with, is kind of just conceptually imputed, i.e. we assume it there. His Holiness says, suddenly it was as if lightning moved through my chest. I was so awestruck that over the next few weeks, whenever I saw people, they seemed like magicians' illusions, in that they appeared to inherently exist, but I knew they actually did not. This is when I began to understand that it's truly possible to stop the process of creating destructive emotions by no longer assenting to the way I and other phenomena appear to exist. Every morning I meditate on emptiness and I recall that experience in order to bring it into the day's activities. Just thinking or saying I, as in I will do such and such, will often trigger that feeling, but I still cannot claim a full understanding of emptiness. So, in what way then is our appearance of I and other things dependent on thought? So the mind's perception is the kind of source of what we experience, and when sought for, the objects of our experience can't really to be found to exist in their own right, despite the appearances to the contrary, and we've already been exploring a bit of that. So things are kind of experienced in the way they either help or harm us, and that really is dependent on our own mentation, our own consciousness. And this is how they exist, not independent, wholly from their own side, like they never did, never do, and never will exist wholly from their own side. Because if we take our own mind and body out of the picture, then there's no existence for us of them. The only way we can experience anything that we experience is through the medium of the mind and the body, the five sense organs, their consciousnesses and mental consciousness, as it were. So in this way, the things that appear to us are dependent on the power of the mind and the power of conventions that we form and share about them. So, as I said, it's not really that we construct the reality of things by thought in that moment. You know, external objects are a part of the process of us and other beings generating consciousness of them. But being dependent on conceptual thought doesn't mean that conceptual thought's needed to construct everything that we experience. There's a kind of more subtle idea here that objects, without being dependent on conceptual thought, can't establish themselves or their existence as they are right within themselves. And it's in this way, you know, when you hear Buddhist teachers talking about people and things, they often use in English the term set up, you know, being set up by conceptual thought. This is kind of what they mean. And if we go back for a moment to the causal, you remember there's three kinds of dependency we're dealing with here: the dependence on causes, the dependence on wholes and parts. But now we're trying to focus on the dependence on thought. If we go back to causes, and I don't know if anybody was fascinated by, I am fascinated by this sort of trivia, where people set up vast numbers of dominoes standing up and go for Guinness Book of Records to see how many they can stand up close to one another in all sorts of patterns. And then they flick the one at the back, and then they go right the way round until the last one falls over. Well, there's a very good analogy of effects depending on causes, but also, and I think we were talking about this a couple of days ago too, there's no inherently existing cause or effect, because some causes can be an effect. So when you see the dominoes being hit like that, any given domino, except for the one you started it with, but that was the cause was your finger, is both a cause and effect as that process kind of rolls through. So every cause itself is an effect of its own, and it's kind of an effect of the causes that preceded it, and so it arises in dependence on its respective causes. Now, in a temporal sequence, effects kind of occur after their causes. So this is dependent arising in the sense of dependent production. But because the designation or the labeling or calling something a cause depends on a consideration of its effect, in this sense, a cause depends upon its effect. There's no cause without an effect. So something is not a cause in and of itself. It's kind of named a cause in relation to its effect. And that's called dependent designation. So, you know, when you hear Buddhist teachers talk about a difference between dependent production and dependent designation, you know, an easy way of getting a handle on it is to say, yeah, the one is about dependence on a cause, and the other one is about it being designated as something as cause and effect are themselves. You know, they're terms and concepts that we use to describe things that happen in the world and in ourselves. So in the same way, agent and action depend upon one another. You know, each is dependent on the other, but not the same as when a cause precedes its effect. So how is it kind of in general that things are relative, that a cause is relative to its effect? Because it's not established or existing in and of itself. And there's another, go back to his Holiness here, because he's so good on it. I want 1, 2, 3. Here we are, yes. right one? I think so. Yeah. As Nagarjuna's follower, Buddhapalita says in a commentary on the 22nd chapter of the fundamental treatise on the middle, called Wisdom, if something exists by way of its own entity, what would be the need for it being posited dependently? Indeed, if a thing existed in itself, that alone would be sufficient. You could just say, it's this, without needing to relate it to anything else. Because it's not established in and of itself, there's no alternative but to posit it in relation to something else. And I've continued to find this thought helpful. In the same way, Tsongkhapa says in his three principal aspects to the path to enlightenment, with the two realizations of dependent arising and emptiness existing simultaneously without alternation, definite knowledge entirely destroys the mode of apprehension of inherent existence. Upon only seeing dependent arising, it is incontrovertible. At that point of analysis of the view, reality is complete. He goes on to sort of reflect on what he beautifully calls the dependent lattice work at the heart of dependent arising. So are we clear about that before I go a little further? Do we feel that, is everybody kind of happy with the subtle dependence of everything that we experience or see on thought? You know, understanding its causes, fairly easy. Understanding how wholes, larger things depend upon smaller things, maybe even understand how things relate in an environment. That's becoming even more clear with our concern for the environment, the extent, the depth, and the complexity of the nature of interdependent relations, but sometimes this one of how our idea of ourself as inherently existing and other things also depend on thought. Sometimes that one's more subtle and a little bit more slippery. So
Monica, would you like to ask your question? Yeah,
I'm still a little unclear about dependent designation. What exactly is that? This was the first time I've heard of the term. So
it's like perhaps a good one with it is when we talk about cause and effect. If you take a good traditional example is the example of the seedling that you plant in the ground, and then the seed becomes a seedling, or a sprout, then a seedling, then a plant. Then there's no more seed, and at various stages in that process, you say, the seed's swollen. But then at some point you're going to say, well, it's not a seed anymore, it's a sprout. And then you're going to say it's not a sprout anymore, it's a plant. And at each stage, the one is the cause of the other. We say the seed is the cause of the oak tree or peepal tree or orange tree or lemon tree or whatever it happens to be. But in doing that, we're using notions of cause and effect, which don't have any inherent existence in themselves, but we're using as terms to designate, to identify and designate something in the process, to identify and individuate something in our experience. But it's not as if you said, well, in the seed, there is the cause, and we could kind of open up the seed and find the cause. You'd find lots of interesting things, bits of DNA and all sorts of things. Yeah. But it's a conceptual designation that we're seeing the seed as the cause of the tree. And that's easy to see because if we go back a bit further, we could go the other way around. We could say, well, where did the seed come from? Oh, a tree. So the tree grows, gets foliage, gets flowers, the flowers get pollinated and seeds occur. So how we put cause and effect, we can't just put it where we like. They're obviously, this is where the conventional bit comes in. We have conventions, you know, if I said, if you sow an acorn, you'll get an orange tree, I'd just be plain wrong. Because I've misapplied the convention, you know what I mean? But what we're saying is none of this is actually kind of out there in the world. It's what we bring to the party conceptually in our explanation and understanding of the world. Is that helpful? Is that more helpful? Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Like that. Yeah.
Are there any other thoughts, comments, or questions that people would like to share with Roy?
If you're clear on it, that's fine. We can move on because we see that. So that's the third one. You remember, the first was causes, second was wholes and parts, or the Mereology, as they fancifully call it now, and sort of dependent designation or dependence on thought. And then if we have another quick look, because it's shifting gear a bit here, and I want to go to, if anybody's following me, this is a part in His Holiness's book, which is on page 223. Well, this might do it. Nearly. Yeah. Yeah. And this is now starting to relate and to connect with. It's a side of things that when people are looking at emptiness, the emptiness of the self, and anatta and so on, don't often bring them the thoughts I'm going to introduce now together. And for me, probably don't bring them together early enough or often enough. Otherwise, it can appear very dry, or you can be thinking almost, so what? And there's a Tibetan saying, yeah, oh, hang on, I missed it again. There's a Tibetan saying that says, it's not sufficient that the doctrine be great, the person must have a great attitude. And Chandrakirti says, I offer homage to loving concern, viewing transmigrators as empty of inherent existence, though they appear to exist inherently, like a reflection of the moon in water. And there's a kind of really profound level of love and compassion, which is made possible by the knowledge of the kind of emptiness of inherent existence. And that's the way Chandrakirti put it. You know, I offer homage to loving concern, viewing transmigrators as empty of inherent existence, though they appear to exist inherently, like a reflection of the moon in water. So the reflection of the moon in a clear, calm sky appears to be the moon in every aspect, as we were talking about earlier with that picture of the monkey, but the moon is actually in the sky. And so as we were kind of looking, that image symbolizes the appearance of I and all other phenomena as if they exist from their own side, in their own right, wholly independent from their own side, but are completely empty of actually existing in that way. So like someone mistaking the reflection of the moon for the moon, we mistake the appearance of I and other phenomena for things that exist in their own right, from their own side. And you can use this and other symbolic and poetic metaphors and analogies. That's one of the reasons I included the Jan Westerhoff book on 12 examples of illusion, because they rather beautifully come from a 19th century Tibetan encyclopedia. And there's fascinating examples of those illusions in there. So you can use those to kind of develop more insight into how we're drawn into suffering by assenting to false appearances, by sort of falling prey to attachment and aversion, which ultimately at their worst become expressed as extreme greed and hatred. And we accumulate karma, experience its consequences, all in the mistaken belief that this reified I exists in a way that it doesn't. And that kind of belief strengthens the cycle. And the cycle is a cycle of pain, and it continues over and over again. So this kind of insight into the emptiness of inherent existence, as I said before, can be really liberating, because it stimulates or releases a kind of spontaneous and profound love and compassion, because you'll vividly see and feel from the depths of your being, from the heart, how unnecessary all this pain and suffering really is. You know, we're all sentient beings suffering in a cycle of behavior. One of Tsongkhapa's examples was like a bucket in a water wheel, kind of driven by the consequences of our actions, imbued with kind of momentary impermanence, and almost like a shimmering reflection under the power of ignorance, habitually going along with and being taken in by the false appearance or illusion of inherent existence. And with this kind of experiential insight, front of, top of, and kind of fresh in our minds, there is the potential for great love and compassion for all sentient beings to spontaneously arise. And you can feel close to them, the same as them in wanting pleasure and happiness and not wanting pain. You know, they also want happiness rather than suffering, just as we do. And to access that kind of depth of love and compassion, it's kind of necessary to come from the insight that both we and all sentient beings are empty of the very kind of inherent existence we think we have, we think they have, they think they have, and they think we have. Pretty much all our destructive and problematic emotions derive from and are kind of dependent on this fundamental ignorance, this avidya, that doesn't know or understand how we, others, and everything that appears to us actually exists and how they actually are. You know, again, because we kind of actively assent to an illusion and misconstrue their nature, but by directly realizing the way things are in reality, empty of this sort of perceived inherent existence, we can liberate ourselves from cycles of pain that drive us and others. And if we have that kind of clarity, insight, and balance, then we're able to be of help to others much more effectively than if we're trapped in these kind of cycles of suffering based upon a very fundamental illusion about the way we and things actually are. So if we're almost going back to where we started, although there are many factors generating the cycles of painful behaviors, the origin and root of suffering, ignorance, the avidya, the actively assenting to the illusion of inherent existence, mistaking it for the way things actually are, can be severed. You know, remember we were saying you can, going back to the Nirvana Krama, the wheel of life, you know, if you sever the root of ignorance, then you cut the root of the whole simulacrum. You know, that's the end of samsara as we know it. You bring about the end of destructive emotions that arise and depend on it. So by repeated study, observation, reflection, meditation, we can internalize this process in the depths of our being, in the heart. You know, it's no good if it just remains an intellectual exercise. And we can then kind of generate an intention, you know, a real intention coming from the heart, from our deepest kind of motivation to achieve liberation in order to be of benefit to all sentient beings with more than just words. You know, we can become spiritual practitioners of kind of greatly increased and ultimately limitless capacity. So on the Bodhisattva path, you know, we also train and practice in ethics, ethical conduct to enable us to control and limit the grosser manifestations of destructive and damaging selfish afflictive emotions, harsh physical and verbal behaviors that harm both ourselves and others. But this ethical practice alone can't completely eradicate the afflictive emotions and realize liberation. So working with antidotes, although helpful, is not enough. It's really only the insight and wisdom, realizing the emptiness of inherent existence, that is the seeing that frees, as it were, that can finally put an end to the origin of suffering and allow us to become absorbed in ultimate love. So on that basis, I was going to guide us through a meditation. So if you...
Roy, before you start the meditation, would you be happy to take a question?
Oh, certainly, yeah. No
Yeah.
problem at all.
Okay, thank you. Amanda, would you like to unmute yourself and ask a question?
Hi, afternoon, everybody. So when you were reading out the Chandrakirti quote, it made me think of compassion and wisdom, the two wings of the bird. Is that what you were talking about? Yeah.
Very much so.
If we have just wisdom, we don't know how to put that into use. We need compassion, don't we, to be able to function effectively? Yeah.
Absolutely. It is very much the two wings of the bird. And also, although, you know, when we, you know, meditate or study, we might focus more on one or the other, but it would be a huge mistake to see them as two completely different or unrelated things. In fact, right at the heart of Mahayana Buddhism is the idea that wisdom and compassion are inseparable. Yeah, they're not two separate things, but they're inseparable. And hence this, sometimes people say, well, how could it be that if you have the insight, if we come at it from the insight point of view, how could it be, because I lost me Chandrakirti for a moment, how could it be if we come at it from an insight point of view and realize the emptiness of ourselves and others in this way, you know, why would that spontaneously give rise to compassion? But it does, because they're inseparable. You can't really have the one without the other. And if we really understood that we and others and all things were not existing inherently in the way that they appear, and then recognize, particularly with sentient beings, the suffering they go through because that delusion is still embedded in them, compassion just pours out. No, once you realize that, and if you've realized it and have a stable realization, then you have the potential to help others. Yes?
At our level, though, we have to kind of put a bit of effort into both wings, don't we?
Oh, of course.
We have to, we can't wait until we become have that more enlightened mind. We have to put a bit of effort in both wings, don't we?
Yeah, it's how a bird learns to fly. You know, it flaps a bit with one, and then a bit more with the other, and then a bit with the other, and then it gets to like, wow, yeah, nice. But yes, of course. No, you don't ignore them, and you don't put enlightenment so far away that you might just as well give up. You know, it's like back to that very old Chinese cliched one. You know, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. No? And also, when you look at it from the path point of view, of course, there's development. But if you look at it from another point of view, it's just a matter of realizing things as they are. But no, it's not. It certainly shouldn't be seen as, if you look at it from the point of view of the result, good to look there, but no good looking there if it demotivates or makes you feel impotent about what you can actually do now. If it's inspiring, that's great. But if it's not, then best to reconnect it with what's possible right here and right now. Yeah, it's great. But yeah, the Chandrakirti does indeed do that. I've lost him. There he is. I offer homage to loving concern, viewing transmigrators as empty of inherent existence, though they appear to exist inherently, like a reflection of the moon in water. It is indeed beautiful. Anyway, let's come back to the posture. Find a nice, comfortable posture. Bring ourselves to the gates of the senses. What we can see, what we can hear. Anything, any smells, any residual tastes, and the totality of felt, somatic, physical sensations. Just checking that out for a moment. Just being present to it in a really simple, uncomplicated, uncontrived way. The fresh immediacy of whatever we're experiencing right here, right now, as a result of the five senses. Broaden the scope of the attention and check out what's going on in mental consciousness. Any big background emotions, positive, negative, or neutral. Kind of overt thought, conversations with oneself, undercurrent thought, processing, past, present, future, memories, images, whatever we find. Not correcting, not modifying, just checking it out, being aware of it. Dropping back down into the body, radically simplifying the focus of the attention within the myriad interdependent, interrelated patterns and waves of bodily sensation. Pick up the rhythm of the sensations of the breath in the body. Just rest the attention, be present in that rhythm, that tide-like ebb and flow of the sensations of the breath in the body. Get some attentional stability and balance by gently bringing the attention back there if we're distracted by anything else. Just rest there. Then gently let go of the breath as an anchor for your attention. Just resting, everything else the same. Alert, relaxed, single-pointed, mindful, undistracted concentration. Just resting there. Unsupported, completely open to whatever arises, abides for a while, changes, transforms, and disappears back into the vast, almost infinite field of awareness. And from there, bring a friend to mind. As you bring the friend to mind, kind of reflect on the process of kind of self-ruinous cycle, sort of driven by failing to see that we and others and all that appears to our experience doesn't really exist in the way that it appears, that it's all these things are empty of any of that sort of inherent existence. So with the friend with you, in front of you, beside you, however you want to imagine it, and kind of reflect, just like me, a human being, this person is lost, bewildered, and kind of confused, just like me, in an ocean of misapprehension of the I as inherently existent, fed by a huge river of ignorance, going back a very long way indeed. We mistake mind and body, self and others, and all phenomena to be inherently existent. Maybe also from a tantric point of view, they're kind of agitated by winds, both strong and subtle, of counterproductive thoughts and actions. So we can just kind of rest in our own sense of that. Recognize that our friend is kind of lost, bewildered, and confused in exactly the same way. I think just like someone mistaking the reflection of the moon, and also for the moon itself, this person kind of mistakes the appearance of I and other phenomena in the same way, thinking that they exist in their own right. By accepting those appearances to exist in the way that they appear, accepting them without knowing that they're false appearances, this person, this friend, is powerlessly drawn into attachment and aversion, and all the afflictive emotions, greed, hatred, accumulating negative karma and suffering the results of their own and others' actions born out of similar ignorance. Thinking through this process, this person, just like me and others, unnecessarily brings pain on themselves as well as others. sort of turning our minds a bit to the four immeasurable thoughts: love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. We can look to cultivate three levels of love. At the first level, this person wants happiness but is bereft. So we can think how wonderful it would be if this friend could be imbued with happiness and all the causes of happiness. Wish them well. To love someone is to wish them imbued with happiness and all the causes of happiness. And then think, this person wants happiness but is bereft. So make a kind of a positive wish that they may, not just that it would be wonderful, that they really will, that they really can be, that may they be imbued with happiness and the causes of happiness. If it's wonderful that they could be, let's wish and positively affirm that they may be. Then at the third level, recognizing that, again, that this person wants happiness but is bereft. See if we can make some sort of wish or intention or motivation to do whatever we can. So you would say, I will do whatever I can to help them, this person, this friend you've brought before you, to be imbued with happiness and all the causes of happiness. Just rest there with that for a moment. Realizing that it would be wonderful if they were imbued with happiness and the causes of happiness. Saying if it would be wonderful, then may they be. And then thinking, I'll do whatever I can to ensure that they are. Then in an analogous way, we could contemplate three levels of compassion. Using the same method, thinking this person wants happiness and doesn't want suffering. Yeah, kind of mired in delusion, stricken with terrible pains. So thinking it would be wonderful if only this person could be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And if it would be wonderful, we could think maybe this person could be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May this person be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And then make a resolve, recognizing that this person wants happiness and doesn't want suffering, yet has the potential to be stricken with terrible pain. Formulate your intention and motivation and say, I will help this person to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And just rest with that for a moment. In that way, with that method, generating love and compassion, realizing how wonderful it would be for them, that if it's wonderful, wishing that it would be possible, may it be so. And then thinking, I'll resolve to do whatever I can to help them realize it. If we find we can do that, then might it be possible to begin to cultivate the total commitment of a bodhisattva, of generating the thoughts that, as we've seen, cyclic existence is driven by ignorance. The wheel of life turns on it. This fundamental ignorance of actively assenting and mistaking appearances as existing in a way that they don't, thinking they have an inherent existence that they just don't have. And on that basis, thinking, therefore, it's realistic for me to work to achieve enlightenment and to help others do the same. I have the possibility to be liberated from samsara, from cyclic existence, from habit, from conditioning. And if I do that, then there's the possibility to realize full potential in full and complete enlightenment, and to be of maximum benefit to help others do the same. Then see if it's possible to at least make, and then subsequently sustain, but at least to make a deep wish, a deep motivation that says, even if I have to do it alone, I will free all sentient beings from suffering and the causes of suffering, and set all sentient beings in happiness and the causes of happiness. And then one by one, in your own way, bring to mind individual sentient beings. First friends, then neutral persons, people who you're kind of indifferent to. And then enemies, people you really can't stand and don't like, starting with the least offensive, and kind of repeat those reflections and meditations, generating love and compassion in those three ways with them. We can't do it all now, but we can begin. We can begin to move in that direction, as His Holiness says in the very text that we've been following. It'll take months and years, but the benefits of the practice will be extraordinary. So in your own time, just let go of the analysis and rest in unsupported, single-pointed, mindful awareness, completely open to whatever arises, abides for a while, transforms, changes, disappears back into the space of consciousness. Just gently returning the attention there to be present. Just rest with whatever experience you have. And when you hear the sound of the gong being struck, just let go completely. Either meditate or not meditate, but just be with whatever experience you have and relax. Well, that kind of brings us to the end of my sessions, at least. Those of you that want to stick to the schedule may continue for as long as you wish. And I'll certainly send you the bibliography for those who are interested, because in doing it this way over Zoom, over 4 days as opposed to 8 or 9, I've had to truncate it quite a bit, spend less time going into as much depth as we might have. But I personally feel quite pleased with being able to get it into the space with sufficient clarity and depth. And of course, there are advantages you don't think of, is that because it was truncated, the intensity and the clarity is a bit better than when it's spaced out. When you space it out, you get an opportunity to go for a deeper dive. So there are pros and cons to both. But I've certainly very much enjoyed it, and I hope you found it worthwhile. Is there anything, we've got a little bit of time because we can do the dedications and then Jenny can come and have a word with us. But are there anything sort of popping up now that's really maybe not clear, or something you wanted to resolve?
I have a suggestion. Is that all right?
Yeah, sure.
It's not actually a question about. Do you know I sent you that little video, and it is quite fascinating, isn't it?
Yes, it's a wonderful.
I wonder whether you could attach that to send it out. I think other people would enjoy that too, wouldn't they?
I'd be very happy to send the
if
link.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I just thought it might be quite good. I found it fascinating.
It's very beautiful. I mean, there are lots of examples of trompe l'oeil, but that one in particular, this one, I think I referred to it earlier. It's done by Chinese artists, and it's in the woods. So he sort of just literally puts the paper up round the tree, and then starts, and it's time-lapse photography. But by the time he's finished, it appears as if like the center section of the tree has been cut out, and there's a beautiful woman standing or dancing on a globe, and the background that you would normally see coming up to the tree is just perfectly reproduced. So it really is a magical illusion, if you know what I mean. Yet again, because you've seen him make it, that it doesn't really exist in the way that it appears, but it still does, even though you know it. So I do think it is a fantastic one to circulate. Thank you for that, Anne.
Thanks for sharing that, Anne. Thank you. Does anybody else have any last things? Tony, would you like to unmute yourself? And
yes, thanks. There's maybe too big a question, and it probably shows my lack of knowledge on Buddhism, but I certainly get all the, I get the stuff we've done in the retreat. It's obviously hugely advantageous to realize deep within that everything's a bit delusory and dependent on all the things we've talked about. But where I have slight difficulties, having realized that, what are you left with? So I think I come from the sort of Advaita Vedanta direction, and you go through a bit of a similar process. It's expressed in completely different language, but essentially you end up at a sort of universal, pure consciousness, Satchidananda, pure existence, pure knowledge, pure joy, bliss. So there's kind of something, not tangible, but there's some concept. Of course, you're also warned, well, we can't really describe it because that's duality. As soon as you bring in words, it's duality. But having realized these things we've been talking about in this retreat, what do you end up with? I understand the practical aspects, which you've talked about this afternoon, makes total sense to me. But sort of conceptually, is emptiness really the void? Is it this nirvana void thing, or that's where I'm? As I say, maybe too big a question to answer. But maybe if you point us.
The last one's certainly not, in the sense that emptiness is certainly not nothingness. You know, it has those connotations because we unfortunately have that as the translation word, emptiness, and for most of us, that's, you know, associated from very early on with nada, nothing. It's empty. There's nothing there, and so we can understand what's being said when somebody says, "Oh, well, no, it's not nothing. It's not a nullification. It's empty of something." What's it empty of? It's empty of inherent existence. This sort of existence that appears to exist in a way that it doesn't. That's what it's empty of. And so therefore, if you do see also emptiness translated as the void, then don't go back to use a Latin word. As a void, it's a plenum void. You know, plenum void is absolutely full. Well, full with what? How can a void be full? It's full with infinite potential. Yeah. Beginningless and endless. Infinite potential. It's pregnant with possibility. Every microsecond is vibrantly alive in that way, albeit still analogies with space. But then going back a little bit further to what you were talking about, in the same way that the Advaitins are saying, it's a bit of a problem and a bit of a disease to say, "Oh, I get it." The dualistic language can't get there. It's ineffable. There's no way of predicating it. It can only be directly realized and experienced. But if only. You've got to cut the butt off. That one that says, "Oh yeah, I know it's, but there must be some way of describing it." No, just let that one drop. Well, you know, what are we holding on to there? Because it's part of that kind of chase, as if there's something behind all this duality that's inherently existing, and there isn't. And I'd unashamedly say Nagarjuna, in modern philosophical terms, is radically anti-foundationalist. There is nothing at the bottom of all of this except what there is. But what there is amazing. If we could only let go of the idea of assenting to it existing in the way that it appears and actually directly perceive it for what it is. That temptation to say, "Oh yeah, I get all this," but it's kind of learning to drop the but, because that but is a kind of I think it's a very subtle looking for some last sliver of something to hold on to that might inherently exist. You know, from the point of view of the Buddha and the point of view of Nagarjuna, is I think one very good Buddhist teacher, when somebody said, "What's the relationship between Nagarjuna and the Buddha?" And the teacher said, "Nagarjuna's the Buddha's best lawyer." Yeah. So it's kind of like that. Such was his understanding, that it's impeccable. But even he found himself in the paradoxical situation, which is worth thinking about. That if I say, or Nagarjuna said, there is absolutely no inherently existing foundation to anything at all, and my opponent says, "Are you saying that's true then?" I really can't answer yes or no, can I? Because if I say no, I deny too much. And if I answer yes, I accept too much and generate a paradox. I've just said, nobody, you can't make a statement like that about the foundation. And so you said there isn't one. So at that point, silence, you're at the limits of language. A lot of interesting philosophy there, but from a point of view of realization, if you like, of actually having a direct perception of reality, it's kind of to the extent that the conceptual activity is helpful and brings one towards a realization of it, it's useful. But to the extent that it becomes a bit of an obsession, or you think, yeah, I know we are bound by dualistic language, but then you think, oh, well, you haven't really understood we're bound by dualistic language, because you're never going to get one of these. I mean, Wittgenstein in the 20th century in Western philosophy had a very similar thing. It's like philosophy is search for some sort of ultimate description of the world or the universe. And he saw it as therapeutic. He said, no, it's really about letting the fly out of the bottle. It's getting people to a point of seeing no such thing is ever going to be achieved. But that doesn't mean you give up philosophy. Even though we know things are the way they are, they still appear the way they are, and we're still deluded by them. So we keep going back to do what we can to let the fly out of the bottle. And it's exactly what the Buddha is saying. If the fly is trapped in samsara, to be liberated and realize its full potential. Same kind, and the Buddha himself is often, my Sanskrit pronunciation is appalling, but it's like Vaisaja Guru. The Buddha is the great doctor with the medicine. What's the disease? We're trapped, we're deluded in samsara, and we take the medicine. See if we can get direct insight into the nature of reality, not be deluded by assenting to things existing as they appear, thereby liberating and realizing our full potential. It might not be helpful, but it's the best I can say from Buddhist point of view.
Yes, I know we haven't got much time. I mean,
Yeah.
so I can work with infinite potential. I know that's still a label. Okay. I'd like to say, well, the clear light is, but it's too much. I will shut up now. Thank you.
So there's lots more. We can have more retreats, more meditation, more study, lots of different topics. But yeah, no, it's great. It's great thinking. Anyway, it's 27. So Jenny, I think it's over to you.
Well, hang on a minute, Roy. So can I just interrupt? Just goes with the recording. Yeah. Ruth's got a question. Are you happy to take it, or would you prefer to take it in a minute?
Quite happy to go. If I'm not, if everybody else is loose about, not worried about running over, that's fine for me.
Is that okay with people?
I'm not under pressure.
Everyone okay? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, Ruth, do you want to lower your hand and ask a question? Yeah.
Oh yeah, lovely. Let me just lower my hand. Thank you. Oh, wonderful. I hope it's a quick one. Might not sound like it's a quick one though. It's I was just wondering, in the course schedule there, Roy, I think there was something, you said something around the lines of ways of possibly monitoring your progress. I mean, in a sense, if like you said, the Zen view, it's like, well, you just drop it all and discover it, but fortunately most of us sort of go step by step, and I find you get certain insights, certain levels of clarity, certain moments, certain things that give you these sort of indicators. And I just wondered if you could say something about that.
First of all, I think it's in working in this way and meditating in this way, in doing the meditation, there's one way to really look at your progress at the basis is the same way you'd evaluate your shamatha, i.e., whatever the ups and downs, however it goes, do I find as I'm going along that it's easier to place the attention on an object, that I'm bringing it back from external or internal distractions slightly less? Are the periods of non-distraction getting longer? am I getting a more profound level of relaxation? It doesn't have to be hugely profound all at once, but it might be. You might be lucky, but at least you're feeling you're settling into that and getting some sort of attentional balance and stability. And then thinking, well, can I introduce this kind of analytical element without completely destroying the basis, like sort of becoming completely distracted, upset by it, disturbed by it, or just where we get, particularly, someone's of a very philosophical disposition, they might just get lost in thought. So all the kind of context of it within the meditation as an analytical meditation gets lost. Well, if you find you can start to bring those together and alternate them, pick them up, put them down, and then at first there's kind of, you can assess your progress a bit in terms of thinking, well, there are certain, as we were going through the some of the set, not all of them and not exactly, because some of them were mine, but the points that His Holiness was using in these set meditations. So initially you might start to learn them, yeah? So what your progress is kind of based on, have I kind of got the point right? But then there's another level, which we were talking about, where you say, okay, having got the principles, can you be creative with it? Can you bring your own experience to it and really bring it to life? As the fifth Dalai Lama was talking about, with some kind of, really engage with it, really bring something to it, so that more and more it starts to be less just an intellectual exercise. And it starts to permeate out into the post-meditative sessions, or even not just permeating out, but you notice things when you're wandering around, you notice things when you're glancing, and you begin to, it becomes less and less something that's just a conceptual idea or something to think about, and you actually start to internalize it, and then it begins to become a way of being. And the real acid test there is, do you lose your rag as easily? Do you grab on to things just like you always did? Or do you find yourself thinking, no, I don't have to. God, what a row, but I'm not going to react like that. And I would agree with you, if you don't have some eye, to that, also as a way of evaluating your progress, then there's something wrong with the practice. I can sit here and be as eloquent as I like, especially with the philosophical training, and here, we've been in lockdown for a long time, and I've been taking advantage of doing a lot of retreats, so I'm very shanty. But if as things start to move out, I get outside and start shouting at somebody over something trivial, then something's wrong there. Well, Roy didn't think he was as far along the path as he may have thought, whatever. So use those common sense sort of ways of evaluating the quality of the meditation, the quality of the study, because one of the other things you can do here, back in its very old Buddhist tripartite, right back to the Pali canon, what is it? It's study, reflection, meditation. Study, reflection, meditation. So that's how to get into the last third of the Noble Eightfold Path, which is divided up into ethics, concentration, and wisdom, with wisdom being the result. So study is easy because you, much like we evaluate ourselves if we're learning online or at school or whatever, have I got the idea? Do I need always to depend on the book? Can I remember it? Can I recall it? And then is my understanding of it deepening? Is it not just a kind of a beginning noddy one, but am I getting more appreciation of it? And then you bring that together with the way of evaluating the quality of your meditation. And then if those come together and you're able to find the time to spend in the practice and get to the point where it's not like, oh, I have to do my practice, or it's some sort of chore, but you really love doing it, then you start maybe looking and thinking, is it affecting the way I am in the world? Do I lose it quite so easily? do I get as depressed as often? Or is it making a difference to the way I relate to myself and other people? Yeah, is that making sense?
That makes total sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you.
If you connect with a good teacher, you know, in that relationship, you can also get a kind of a reality check on all of those things. And I think when at the end, when it comes to wisdom, you know, the direct perception of reality, then a reality check from a realized teacher is kind of really, really important and extremely valuable. But that doesn't mean there's nothing we can do between now and then. And we may already have one, I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you, Roy. Is your next course highly relevant to all this? The one in January?
In January, we're doing Mahamudra, which is it's Sutra Mahamudra, so it's a meditation practice. Its goal is to realize the nature of the mind, and the nature of the mind is empty. But it will be in structure somewhat more traditional to this, because I'm going to do it according to a lineage. Is that making sense? So I don't really feel it's...
Okay, so it's compatible though with this. It's compatible with these 4 days.
Totally and utterly, yes. In fact, all of the Mahamudra lineages combine both analytical and non-conceptual meditation.
Lovely. Okay, I may do that, yeah. Thank you, Roy. Thanks very much for these 4 days. It's wonderful.
Looking at the nature of the mind itself. Yeah.
Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roy. Yeah. Would you like to move to the dedication prayers before we move to Jenny?
Sure, I'll do that. And Olia, on the practice, I'll do the email. You can, and similarly, when I send the things out, you know, within reason, if anything's coming up as a result of the course, and you will have my email in virtue of me doing that. So if there are any practice questions about practice or about study, I'm, you know, within reason, I'll respond as best I can.
Thank you very much, Roy. I just wanted to add quickly that I will send a bit of clarification before, so if you could wait up for that, my question before answering, that will be wonderful. Thank you.
Very happy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's dedicate. Let's, as I say, whatever benefit we feel we've got, you know, whether it's our enjoyment, our joy, our insights, whatever we've got, whatever we feel we got out of this, take this opportunity through the dedications to cultivate the first perfection of a bodhisattva, dana paramita, generosity, by imagining, by bringing all those benefits and thinking, I'd like to give this away so that it can be of the maximum benefit to all sentient beings. So it's wholly in line with the kind of Mahayana motivation that we've been inculcating since the beginning. And we do that by turning it over, dedicating it to the awakened mind itself, bodhicitta, awakened citta mind, bodhi, awakened citta mind, to the awakening mind. And this is kind of a deep wish that will arise in all those mind streams where it's not yet arisen, and in those that it has already arisen, not decline, but increase further and further. And then to reinforce that by wishing that the same might happen with the precious view of emptiness, because without the precious view of emptiness, there's no possibility of the awakening mind. Yang chup sem churin boche, ma kyu panam kyu gujing kyu nyampa me payang gong ne gong lu elwa jo. Tony Taba Rinpoche, Makir Panam Kirgu Jing, Kiapa Nyampa Mepa Yang, Gongne Gongdu Pelwa Jo. May the precious Supreme Bodhicitta, not yet born, arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. May the precious view of emptiness, not yet born, arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Roy, for a really precious, inspiring and beneficial 4 days. Thank you.